Well, good afternoon on this wonderful Friday. How are you?
I'm good. Can't
Good.
complain. My hair is, I can't do a thing with it, so I'm wearing a hat.
Bad hair days are okay.
And it's gratuitous advertising.
And that's even better.
Even better. Exactly. Anyway, it's been a while. It took us a while to get back together, but unfortunately, we had a bunch of stuff to do here.
Yeah, well, I think that's just the time of life. You get these things and they just kind of pop up and they gotta be done, whether you like it or not. So CS la vie.
Yes, Livy. There, we adjusted my camera.
There.
Shaved today, but I thought, I'm going to go. But if I can't do anything with my hair, I'll not do anything with my beard either.
Well, I've been growing mine now for about a month.
Yeah, it looks like it's almost ready.
Yeah. So it's been about a week or so since we had a little chit chat. Not
Much
much.
has happened since we had our chit chat.
I don't
And,
think it's changed at all. I mean, the sun still came up in the east this morning. I'm sure it's going to set in the west. And
and just like balloons, they start off in the east and then go to the west.
well, if it hits the prevailing jet current, I guess it might.
It's certainly got a lot of people talking. And, from the border poll perspective of having a situation, things crossing borders, this without authorization,
Mhm.
this is a classic.
Well, I guess even if I guess it's been shot down, was a weather balloon and it did kind of go off track, you would have thought that the owning authority would have advised people that that was the case. I don't know. Maybe perhaps I'm being a bit naive.
Well, apparently yesterday they shot another one down and they don't know what it is. No, that's as bad as shooting something down, waiting a long time to figure out what it is. And we're not going to even bother to find out what it is. We're going to blow it out of the sky. So I don't know if is this being trigger happy or we're really not sure what we're doing. I mean, it's scary, because these things can get very quickly out of control.
Yeah.
And it's one thing for the folks in our neck of the woods to be getting all bent out of shape about this balloon and how it flew over the Aleutians, Alaska, then through Alberta, Saskatchewan, then into the States, and eventually got knocked out just outside of Myrtle Beach. And they're still trying to find the pieces because the last I heard, which is about an hour ago, they haven't found the pieces that really make any sense to anybody, or they're simply not saying. And then yesterday, they do the same thing, and that's somewhere out there in the snows of Alaska, trying to find what that was. And apparently, whatever was hanging at the bottom of that balloon was the size of a small car, but they don't know what it was, and they clearly blew it, got rid of it.
Well,
And it seems to be a little bit bizarre. And we just having one little bit of bad, bizarre news after that. And China demands, that its stuff be returned. Now, what, in a cardboard box? I mean, I don't know. What demands can China really exert? Um,
well, I guess it all gets down into posturing and I don't know, go positive press and get your story out and let's run with that. I don't know.
well, it's just not been a very, we were planning on talking about things that seem to be improving in the world, but it just seems not to be doing so. We're not able to do much in the sense of finding good news stories recently.
Well, that's true. I mean, I'm sure they must be out there, but you put in something on the net to search for it, and it seems to be geared to bringing up catastrophic events, terrible events, sob stories, what have you. Certainly not very easy to get a link to put you to a positive outlook story, that's for sure.
Not at all. And in fact, the latest story that came out is the business of who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. And that one is really quite a scary one, I think, because it portends to be a lot more dangerous than anything we've seen before. If you put aside the hubris and what side of the fence you're on with regard to this whole
Ukrainian conflict.
Yeah. It was always bizarre to suggest that the bad guys would blow up their own stuff. I mean, that just, if we're going to look at it from one side. Then if you look at it from the other side, the bad guys blew up their stuff. Now, if this report, which has been written by Seymour Hersh, who's a very well-respected journalist. I mean, he's the guy that unearthed the My Lai massacre, for example. This is not some, Yahoo, TikTok kind of thing. He wrote on his Substack channel, but obviously picked up by New York Times and others. This is the story with really verifiable folks on how this got blown up. And it really goes down. The US Navy went and blew this thing up, period. Okay, now there's big silence, of course, by the people in Washington, because what do you do with this case? If the shoe was on the other foot, and this is the part that makes me nervous, because if you're going to go around accusing other countries of doing untoward things, okay, and you get caught essentially with your pants down,
yeah,
okay, and you're dealing with a situation with the nuclear weapons on both sides, and a whole lot of other ancillary reports which are coming out in dribs and drabs, which are not particularly favorable to the side that the Western countries have jumped on board. There's a whole lot of people getting killed here, and it's really very disappointing that there's a reticence to speak the truth here. And I realize in the fog of war, truth is something you don't see, but we're messing about with powers that once unleashed, you could, this really, you cannot put back in the bottle. Moreover, what really is very discouraging is the fact that the vast majority of the people on this planet are not interested in what's going on in Ukraine. This is really a very local civil war kind of situation that somehow is sucked in essentially the NATO countries, most of them. Some of them, of course, are starting to chafe at the suggestion they're going to go broke and freeze in the dark over a most corrupt country in Europe going to war with an equally corrupt country in Europe. And all of a sudden we've decided we're going to choose this corrupt country over the other corrupt country. And in a sense, without even telling us what the end result here is supposed to be. So for little people like us who just sit here in the armchair and trying to figure out why are these things happening, when there's all little dribs and drabs of information coming out, which is not particularly favorable to our side, which is that the POWs, Russians, are being murdered by renegade forces on the Ukrainian side, and that there's a possibility of even chemical weapons being used by these renegade forces. Then you got to wonder, okay, so what happens if this really goes out of control? Man, this is not anymore well, I'm just gonna, wave my little Ukrainian flag that I put at the end of my driveway because I hate Russians. Because, okay, that's fine. Except that if your side is starting to do stuff because it's losing that it can't really deal with, if that's the case, again, the truth of the internet is full of lies. I admit that. Be the first to admit it. Except that there are some things that are becoming very evident. And that is, if this war was going so well for the folks on supposedly our side, then you wouldn't need all this money, all this equipment, and all this hullabaloo, because the other side's losing. The other side is not apparently losing. Okay, when you have to get kind of creative to see what is actually going on in the news, without, and it clearly will be accused if we're trying to get to the truth of, oh, you must be, some sort of
Whatever
friend
the
of Putin. There's nothing can be further from the truth here. But we're fooling around with some very dangerous stuff. And for folks like us who are given very little information that we can believe in anymore because they've been lying to us over and over again. And when a guy like this esteemed journalist quite literally connects the dots, it has an impeccable reputation, not the craziness you get on the mainstream media in the States particularly. It gets you get very nervous, and I am getting nervous now about how this is starting to unravel.
Well, I think you're right. Talking about deaths, war is terrible. I don't care whether you're a pro or you're an anti. This is some families' children that are going out there to be cannon fodder for some unknown purpose, for the greater good, for the greater cause. Yeah, I don't know. I'm quite happy that I never had to make that decision. I know my grandfather did, my dad did. I'm sure back in your family history, you'd find the same thing as well. I certainly wouldn't want to see my kids or my grandkids heading off into some contrived conflict. Yeah, to do what? And I don't know. And I guess on a positive side, although it's not so good, the earthquake in Turkey. It seems to me that Russia has sent people there. Obviously, when you have a big humanitarian event, people seem to put aside their flag waving, whatever you want to call it, and are jumping in to help, which speaks well to humanity. But then in the next minute, they go back to shooting and killing on some other front. It's such a paradox. It's
Well, in fact, the situation with the earthquake is almost unimaginable. That there are over 20,000 dead now.
Mhm.
And when you look at the international efforts for the last 4 or 5 days to deal with this, some countries, as you said, even though they may not be our cup of tea, have really stepped up to the plate and gone to help with various teams. I'm somewhat saddened by the reaction of our own government here in Canada, which really basically just wants to send money to the Red Cross or whoever based on a dollar-to-dollar donation of Canadians. Whereas other countries didn't start worrying about money. They went and put together teams, military or civilian rescue teams, got them on a plane and got them over there. And I think it's shameful that our people basically didn't step up to the plate. I'm sorry. This is not how you do it.
I know there's been a few here that left out of Vancouver that are with search and rescue or first responders that are in their own little, I don't want to say club, but That's what they do. And, you know, they left Vancouver and landed, and within an hour we're at the rubble sites with their dogs and their shovels and their picks, and not supported by the federal government. I guess that's the concern I have.
Well, that's to me, that's to me the shameful part, because there should have been, first of all, it's a NATO ally, Turkey. And you know, this is such an overwhelming disaster to start fooling around with, oh, well, if you give $1, we'll give $1 and we'll get the, oh, come on, there should have been a C-17 ready to go as soon as possible with folks like the people. How did the people in Vancouver there get on an Air Canada flight on a, you know, I mean, this is not how you do it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know who thought this was a good idea, but I will categorically say shame on them, because that's not how you do. This is such a huge disaster, into
Well, it
play,
is, you know,
be
and
such an amateur about it. It's just
it
reflects
does,
very poorly on her.
and you're right, it does make me wonder, concerned, where we're sitting, right on top of a very huge earthquake zone that we've been told for the last 60, 70 years that the big one is coming. It's not a matter of if it will come, it's when it will come.
Yes.
Uh, and the size of the fault zone here, I mean, it stretches from California right up the coast, right, 22 miles, however many kilometers off the west coast of Vancouver Island. You know, if something is major, not that we haven't had sevens, and even I think we had an 8, but they're deep and they're far offshore, and we're worried about tsunamis. But if the big epicenter happens under downtown Vancouver, you know, we could see equal or greater casualties than what we're seeing in Turkey. Would other governments stand up? I mean, it's not like you keep track of who's showing up and who's not showing up. And well, if they didn't show up to our earthquake, we're not going to show up to theirs. It does make you a little worried and concerned. And but I said, the outside, the positive thing is that the United States, Russia, and a lot of other countries are stepping up to the plate and putting people in. And to me, that's a big plus. That's a positive thing. It shows
Absolutely.
humanity isn't dead, I guess.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And you know, like I say, it's just sometimes you just have to shake your head. And this has been the, you know, since we last chatted, so many things have happened where literally you just shake your head and you go, what is really going on? You know,
Well,
who,
you know, we've talked about that before, where we've said, you know, if the focus is on the right hand and everybody's looking at the right hand, what is the left hand doing? And I don't know, is there people out there that are looking at the other sides and trying to, obviously this journalist is trying to do that, I guess, you know, if it's,
well, to me, the case of this business of blowing up the pipeline, it sends a signal to that part of the world which is not taking sides, you might say, that there's something very wrong with how the West conducts its hyperbole with respect to, you know, what's right and what's wrong. I'm quite sure that had adversaries of U.S. decide to take out a pipeline, we would be in a much different situation. And you have to almost say that the restraint being exercised by the Russians on this is remarkable. You know, I think it's $5 billion that was basically destroyed. You know, and then the question is, how long do you keep Germany, stalwart ally of the West in NATO, basically sitting and saying, yes, who are the prime beneficiaries of that fuel, right? On the sideline. Like, at what point do the folks in Germany go, we've been double crossed here. We've been had. This is not what we signed up for.
Well, there's that, yeah, and then there's our federal government who have been approached both on both our coasts, east and west, to have natural gas shipments provided to help offset some of these costs and the reliance on rogue oil. And it seems to me that all they got was a talking to about how they shouldn't be using fossil fuels to begin with. So, yeah, I'm at a loss on that. But you would think we could step up and be a world player on that. Yeah, okay. Natural gas is a fossil fuel, not as bad as coal, not as bad as oil. I don't know.
Well, the latest little bit of information as you were chatting here just came across on what you call the flyby news. It says here that sanctions have made India indispensable to the global energy market. Indian media has revealed in mid-January that their country's been processing and re-exporting discounted Russian oil to the West, including the United States, in a move that discredited the spirit of the de facto Cold War between anti-Russian sanctions that are going on. Are you serious? And of course, all of a sudden, folks are brushing this one off since they were against the worldview when it was taken for granted the U.S. led, this sanction business. And now all of a sudden, according to experts, well, the new oil map, India turns the Russian crude into the West's fuel. Well, just because the oil went around some other route, then the whole business of sanctions is nonsense. Like, somebody's making a whole lot of money somewhere here.
Well, isn't that the old adage? Follow the money.
Yeah, well, because the U.S. Treasury said that they had two main goals: to keep the market well supplied and deprive Russia of oil revenue. Well, I guess none of those is working. They're still getting the revenue via the Indians, okay, and then the oil is showing up somewhere. You can't hide this stuff. I mean, it says the other thing it came across here is that they're aware that Indian and Chinese refineries can earn bigger margins by buying discounted Russian crude and exporting products at market prices, and they're just fine with that. So, what are you telling me here?
Yeah.
And
this is business as usual is all it really boils down to.
It really is a disgusting bit of news. And it doesn't surprise me when the level of corruption a year before all this started to happen, everybody knew that those two main players were the most corrupt countries on the face of the earth. So, basically we've now taken two corrupt countries that are in a tiff with terrible consequences. Yet at the same time, that corruption is now seen to be quite okay in terms of, well, that energy, that fuel is being processed and going on elsewhere, and we're still making money. And if you thought the sanctions were going to choke off the Russians, well, they're making money, thank you very much, and the Indians are helping them, and the oil that they're not supposed to use coming out of Russia is going to the U.S. Well, holy moly, there's a whole lot of lying going on here.
Well, yeah, it's also, you got to make a question mark about the Keystone pipeline or the XL pipeline or something that's been canceled that would have put a lot more oil into the refineries in the U.S. But maybe that's part of our government's deal too. I don't know.
Well, some time ago, long before this whole mess in Ukraine happened, the smart money was talking about the next global conflict is not going to be about ideologies or it's going to be about energy, and it is turning out to be energy. And the people who appear to be or de facto in charge of the policies are either totally incompetent or totally corrupt or ideological morons, or all three, because we're doing stuff in the West. It's almost suicidal, like it makes no sense. And
Yeah.
I've really not thought about it a whole lot until I started looking at things like, the science of this whole nonsense. There's a fellow whose name escapes me at the moment, but he was talking last week on a forum about how we're changing fluid energy into mineral energy. In other words, we took octane that comes out of fossil fuels and makes energy that is about 1% to a 0.5% of the world's land mass used. In other words, you take the stuff out of the ground, you refine it, you put it on trucks or pipelines, and it goes off in little packets, and everybody gets the energy, and it runs cars, it heats houses, it makes fertilizer, blah, blah, blah. But to do it the other way around, to make it only a mineral-based energy, where you've got to dig huge holes all over the world of copper and lithium and silver and what have you, which, by the way, is not done with the wind turbines or solar panels, because the energy required to mine this stuff is enormous. And there's really no feasible way of transporting it to where it needs to be, the end user. Yes, you might have some electric cars somewhere, but we don't have globally anything even remotely close to what the Pollyanna stuff about having all this energy created through the solar panels and the wind turbines, and plug them into wires, and it goes in everybody's house and into their cars and blah, blah, blah. It's becoming so silly at the
Well,
scientific level.
I
It's
guess
just not feasible.
it kind of boils down into our little organization. It appears that with this newfangled way of doing business on oil or gas or whatever, where are the borders involved in this? It sure doesn't seem to be any. It just
No.
seems to be a multinational global concern, and it seems to be dictating what's transpiring and not transpiring.
Well, it seems that the nation states are quite happy to throw away their sovereignty while they marry up with big corporations and energy interests. Because I mean, there's money to be made here. It's very clear. I mean, if we're to take even half of what we just got about the Indians going around the flagpole with the oil, so to speak, there's no borders here. It's a commodity that's being that is globalized. You want to talk about globalization? Well, energy is global.
Hmm.
Okay, and if you take the south of the globe, they're not interested in this other stuff we're talking about.
No, 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 and even to a certain extent in Europe, I imagine it wasn't whether the war in the Ukraine was going on. It was, gee, how am I going to pay this massive heating bill or this electric bill and even here, we went grocery shopping the other day and just amazed. I think we picked up 4 potatoes that you use for baking, and it was $7. 4 potatoes.
But that's not sustainable, Bob.
No, no.
I'm sorry. I don't care what these geniuses are talking about, particularly with the, I think, outright lies of the taxes that return to the lower and middle classes are paying these to save the planet. This is nonsense. Everybody knows it is. And I don't, I know we're going to be, there's going to be folks who think we're some sort of, aluminum hatted people here who don't want to listen. If cities want to have electric cars, that probably works to a limited extent. But this is not what they're talking about. And for ordinary folks who are looking at paying $7 for 4 potatoes, this is not sustainable. I don't care what they say.
Yeah.
This will not end well.
And I guess the other thing, as you said too, electric cars, big city. Let's pick one. Regina, Saskatchewan, big city, decides it's going to have total infrastructure of electric cars. Where's the money going to come from to fix the potholes? Because some of that money is coming out of the fossil fuels that used to be filling up cars that were driving on the roads. I don't know of any municipality anywhere in Canada that is charging electric cars for anything other than filling up on the electric, right? I mean,
Well,
part of the money that I pay goes to do transit taxes, to do road repairs, and you know,
well, they've not. That's the third rail here for economists to talk about. Well, how do you distill the taxes down to other areas that require it, and which until now have been harnessed through the use of fossil fuel consumption. You know, there's no effort at the moment that I'm aware of to legitimize that in any way, shape, or form. They're talking about credits up to $7,500 for someone to buy a car that most people can't afford. I mean, this is an elitist process that only benefits those who have an ideological bent about it. But frankly speaking, on the greater, even if you buy into the climate change religion, the amount of impact we're talking about is minuscule for the outlay and for the disruption and the pain and suffering that ordinary folks will have to put up with, so that some person can take their Tesla and whiz around in town. I'm sorry, it's we're not there yet. This is not the Jetsons, okay? We're not living. George Jetson isn't flying off to work. Well, anyway, I'm going off here on a tangent.
anyway. But then that brings up another point. If we get to the George Jetsons, I can't even remember. Way too young, I guess, to be concerned about borders at that time. But does the world that George Jetson lived in, do they have borders?
Well, if you look at what the parent policy in North America is, there are no borders.
Yeah.
Okay, Ottawa and Washington. Let's for example, let's just focus on this part of the world that you and I live in. The border issue is what are we talking about? We have 5 million people in the last 2 years or so have entered in through the U.S. And they can't track them, and they can't house them, and they can't. It's just a mess. Again, if someone can explain the objective in a succinct way, and I don't care if they're leftists or rightists or whatever the devil they are, but no one does any. All it is rhetoric,
Yeah.
and it's all based on emotion, but it doesn't talk about the people who are impacted on it because either their property's damaged, their jobs are gone, or that's the whole thing. And then in Canada, we have this rocks and road fiasco, which is completely ridiculous, right? And all we hear, and I don't care whether you're listening to one side or the other in Parliament, they're just yakking, but they're not doing anything.
Yeah.
But clearly, the discussion between the two capitals is that's okay because that's what we're going to do. And the folks who are doing this are both cut from the same political cloth. So to them, whatever their ultimate goal is, which they've yet to explain.
Well, I guess, and again, to put it back into my limited perspective, by having Western Road staffed, be that with Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Quebec Provincial Police, whatever you put there, is that then not by its very nature a port of entry? People are going,
Well,
which then falls, in my estimation, under the safe third country agreement that was signed. But there are some simple answers, I think, and maybe that's my problem. I'm just looking at it too simplistically. But
well, we have complicated the devil out of most things that were over the years, but it's been a paradise for lawyers and various activists. It keeps them well greased financially, but it's I think we'll do some research for our next discussion about just what does this no borders thing look like? Because especially if we talk about sort of the challenges that we're faced right now on a much grander scale with geopolitical shifts here, are we live in very dangerous times, and the impact on borders. If you don't, you know, I'm trying to synthesize the issue of this warlike stance we're starting to take, and then a no rules movement of people back and forth. Like, what does that mean? Okay, I mean, can you imagine that in previous conflicts going back 80 years, if there was no, well, we don't need a border, the Germans can come, the Japanese can come, no problem. And we're at war with them, yeah, but that doesn't matter. Well, who's going to stop them? Because that it's almost, I know that's almost a silly way to compare it, but
It is, but you know, anyway, yeah, we'll do some research on that one.
okay,
Maybe from that we might find some positive things.
hopefully. Anyway, time is up, partner. It's time for us to sign off. So let's resume a week from now. We'll do some research on. In fact, we may have some answers just by watching the news next week.
And hopefully, again, we can't stress enough, if you've got a comment, plus or minus, on what we've been rambling about today or about open borders, feed them through.
Yeah.
Love to read them.
Hit that button, that like button and subscribe button.
Yeah.
All righty. All right. I'll see you in a week, bud.
You bet. Enjoy.
We'll try. Take care.